What are we talking about today, Jack?
I don't know. I figure we talk a little bit about everything. We'll get to it. How, obviously you're in studio, huh?
Mm-hmm. Back in studio.
What, and you got guests coming on after this or what?
No, our show's tomorrow, so I don't have to, let's see, what day is it? No, my show's not till Thursday. So I actually have a few of these today. I'm going to be on yours podcast, and Billy DeMoss and I are doing an interview. Be on War Room in the afternoon with what's his face from InfoWars, the younger guy. So doing a couple of these, kind of a day of media. So it'll be good.
You look good.
How have you been?
I've been well. How's everything with the house? I'm so sorry to hear about what happened.
You know, shit happens. I think I'm really come to terms with the fact that we're being led out of California. That's what it really, I was really asking questions about right before the house burned down. I had said to Lee, you know, and it was my mother-in-law's home. It's spectacular. It was utopia. And, you know, we tried to get Senator Payne kicked out. We couldn't do that. And I was just saying to Lee, if it's time to leave California, you know, I always look at things like sort of Nazi Germany. Why didn't the Jews just get out of there? You know, didn't you see it coming? And I was saying to Lee, you know, I'm concerned that because we live in such a beautiful home, this home may be clouding our vision on, you know, we're supposed to be perhaps moving on and getting out of here, you know. And then like literally a week later is gone. And so you have to like take some thought, you know, in there. And then when I was like, well, I mean, it's just, you know, show me another sign. And then like 2 days later, a really good friend of my son's, 10 years old, fell through his skylight in his house. His mother called me. She's like, vaccine. I said, is he bleeding? She's like, yeah. She's like, it's like a road rash. I was like, he doesn't need a Tdap vaccine. Besides, it'd be too late for it anyway. She's like, I know, I said all those things. So we'll just stand your ground. Like 10 hours later, she calls me sobbing. She's like, they've got Child Protective Services on the way if I don't get this vaccine, you know, and I've had it. I've had it with California. This place has gone absolutely nuts.
You know, I was talking to somebody who was, I think somebody told me that you guys were thinking about that as well. And that Nazi Germany analogy, that's such it's sad, but it's just reality. And
it is.
In that state and all the expense and everything. Of course, it's so amazingly beautiful, except for just the massive humanity and all the politics and everything. It's just so sad how we've destroyed such a beautiful environment.
I know, it really is terrible. And we're looking at Arizona. I mean, Arizona's in there. How long, you know, you think your laws are going to hold up for a while?
Well, you know, in Arizona, there are 3 exemptions in Arizona, as you know, and Governor Doug Ducey is a Republican, and whether Republicans or Democrats, you know, whatever, but he has stated that under his watch, there will be no changes in vaccine legislation. They tried to push something through about this educational process where if you're going to refuse vaccines, well, then you have to be educated. You have to go through the whole video seminar, and that failed. And there's still a lot of pushback and a lot of anger amongst people that, hey, what's the big deal? We're just trying, you know, you just should have to watch this video. And it's like, wait a second, maybe you should watch one of our videos.
Right. How about watch our video? Exactly.
Watch our video and let's teach it that way. So Governor Doug Ducey, Heather and I have we've spoken with him on several occasions. We've been, you know, down at Arizona legislature and talking to them as well. But as you know, things can flip on a dime very quickly. We've relocated to Colorado. So,
oh, you're in Colorado. The only thing that keeps me from Colorado is my own family. And, you know, I caught Lee looking at houses in Boulder. I was like, what are you doing?
I know you're a Boulder guy, but I think that, you know, Denver, Colorado Springs, I'm no expert on those communities, but they're also very polluted and they're very overly populated. We actually moved outside of Aspen, and we went from 6 million people in Phoenix to 6,000 in the town that we're in. So
what town are you in?
It is magical Carbondale. We're in Carbondale, Colorado.
All right.
And that being said, and by the way, I'm recording everything that we're talking about right now.
Okay.
So, because all this stuff, of course, is great material. our kids are at a Waldorf school in Carbondale, Colorado. And when we, I'm here to interview you and I'm talking the whole time, right? But when we came out here, the people at the Waldorf school, we were excited because Waldorf, if you read the old stuff on Rudolf Steiner, and anti-vaccine, 1917, and he was like Nostradamus describing the whole situation now. Well, the people at the school asked us, they said, we're anti-media. We're all about, we're into eating organic food, and we love gluten-free, and we want children to play, all these great things. But we're a little concerned about you, the Wolfsons, because of your anti-vaccine stance and the things you've said. And are you going to start like trying to proselytize and tell everybody here? And we said, listen, people ask us, we're going to talk about it. I'm not going to like go out on the stump in front of the school and start giving a lecture. Heather might. I can't speak for her. She might.
But still, I mean, even still, when you read what Rudolf Steiner said about vaccines, it's incredible to me that that's even a statement by a Waldorf school. Like, you couldn't get someone that was more prophetic and, about the danger of the future of vaccines. I mean, essentially he said this is going to be the death of the soul. And we left a Waldorf school because they would not really say that they would protect our kids. All I was asking for when we were at the school was, will you at least call us if the police come or they're saying there's some outbreak? Will you call us so we can come get our kids? And they're like, I don't know. We're going to do whatever we're told to do. I was like, I'm out.
It's not a good option. What were your thoughts on the chickenpox outbreak? Because obviously, it happened a month ago in North Carolina and all the blowback they got. What was your take on that whole situation?
So, with chickenpox outbreaks, obviously, I think it's ridiculous how, upset people get. It's the chickenpox. I put a video out about chickenpox last week, just saying, when you show me anyone, whoever remembers your grandparents or anyone telling you a story about someone dying from the chickenpox. Yet in the news, you hear deadly. I mean, they're literally starting to refer to chickenpox as deadly. And I think what we're watching is the same playbook they pulled on measles, where they rewrote the history of measles and made it the Black Plague when everybody got it. No one was afraid of it. It was a Brady Bunch episode. Well, now right before our eyes, for this generation that still remembers getting chickenpox, now they're doing the same thing to chickenpox. They're trying to make us, terrified of the chickenpox. One thing I have issues with is that I don't think our fight, for those of us that are into vaccine risk awareness, personally, I don't take issue with them not wanting my kid in school if they're unvaccinated. I don't think that that's our fight. I'm not, when people are complaining that they're kicking our kids out of school because there's an outbreak, I think that if you're going to not vaccinate, what you're saying is that you believe that quarantine is a better approach towards the spread, stopping the spread of infectious disease. I think that the best, we know that the Leicester experiment, that polio was stopped. The only place that really, truly eradicated polio, didn't have polio issues at the time, was the one town that just used quarantine as the way they dealt with it versus inoculating everybody. So I think that I would piss a lot of people off by saying this that are in our movement. But if there's an outbreak in town, I think one of the things we accept as part of that is, okay, we got to bring our kids home and school them. I think we could start demanding some satellite training for our kids or an online school that while we're out of the school. But personally, I think that if you're going to argue natural approaches to immunity and natural approaches to infectious disease, you have to accept that, we believe in quarantine then. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I would have to disagree with you. I don't believe in quarantine because just like you said, for chickenpox, like if there's a chickenpox outbreak in the school, I want my kids to get exposed. I want them to get exposed initially because I want them to get chickenpox. And my boys, they've not been officially diagnosed with chickenpox, but let me just say, I highly believe they've had chickenpox. And I'm qualifying this because there's likely some a-hole who's going to listen to this conversation and is going to say, Wolfson had kids had chickenpox. They didn't report it to the state authorities, and they didn't seek out medical treatment, and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know for sure my kids had chickenpox. I think they did. But that being said, I want them to get that continuous exposure, and chickenpox should be all over society because that'll prevent shingles and may have unknown benefits that once again, science hasn't told us yet. But the idea of quarantine, I understand how that could theoretically stop the spread of things like Ebola and whatnot, but the healthy, strong person shouldn't have a problem with that, right? I mean, your kids they're fed organic food and they go to sleep on time and they're not, glued into the television set 24/7 and they're getting sunshine. If they're healthy kids away from all the chemicals, I'm not afraid of the polio virus. I'm not afraid of any virus. I'm not afraid of any bacteria. I'm not afraid of any parasite. We've been with those things for millions of years. That's how I feel. I wouldn't.
I think that I totally agree with you on a personal level. I think that where you and I tend to diverge a little bit is I look at the political climate and where are we strongest and where are our strongest arguments. I think that, look at you, I love the fact that you are as pure and clear. You live exactly how you speak. I live a little cleaner life than I talk about. I too want my kids to get the chickenpox. I just think that it's a heavy lift to get people to accept we want chickenpox, we want it in an environment when we're trying to work on acceptance, when we're trying to get people to just understand where we're at. I think it's a little bit too big a step. I could be wrong, and I'm not fully, this isn't something I'm diehard on, and I really haven't even spoken about on my show on that level. I just think that the fear shouldn't be there. Chickenpox should be. We know everyone's healthier if they get natural chickenpox. I just think back to when I was a kid. I always think, how was I raised? My mom didn't vaccinate me. And I remember once in, I think it was in like third grade, they just started doing strep cultures on everybody in the school. I don't know if the strep was going around, and I tested positive. And they said, you got to go home. And my mom didn't really fight it. She was like, okay, fine. Took a bunch of vitamin C. I never got sick. I got a week off from school. I had a really good time. It didn't bother me. And maybe perhaps because because I was homeschooled, I think there are people that really have a lot of trouble because if their kid is sent home, I can't go to work. It messes up their lives. And that's perhaps something I'm not taking into account because my parents didn't have that issue, and I personally don't have that issue with my kids. They are at home. When they were in school, I wouldn't have had a problem them being home. So all of these things, I guess I'm sort of thinking out loud with you. I just think that the things that Informed Consent Action Network focuses on, my nonprofit, are places we can really win the public and get the public onto our side. And I try to stay focused on those places where we can find some common ground. The issues of safety of vaccines, all of that, we're winning there. And this issue of my kid should be in school during measles outbreak and chickenpox outbreak, I know you're right. I'm just not sure if it helps us in the current climate of winning over society to accepting that there's those of us that just simply deserve the right to live a clean life.
Yeah, it's, obviously there's a lot of different battlegrounds to fight on. And obviously where Heather and I choose to fight on is, I guess, could be considered extreme. And it's really taking that sledgehammer approach and hitting people over the head and say, no, we want to embrace these viruses and bacteria because that's the way we've done it for millions of years. And we want to push the health and the wellness of the child and not be fearful of these things. And right. If we want to, if there is a measles outbreak at the school and we want to take our children home, that should be our choice. But we shouldn't be said, okay, you got to be home, 21 days, you got to be out. We really want society to understand that these infections have benefits, and they've had benefits for millions of years in the symbiotic relationship.
You're absolutely right, and you are one of the guys that I think that's on the forefront of getting that across, the different, brain issues and heart issues that can be alleviated simply by having had your childhood illnesses. I think it's great. What I think, one of the things I've been thinking about lately, Jack, is that I think they're on the verge of destroying their own herd immunity argument. And at that point, it's going to disappear. Because if you think about it, when I was a kid and we weren't being vaccinated, there was always issues in school. This isn't brand new. The school would say, we have a vaccination policy. And my mom would say, what is your problem with my child? If vaccinations work and you believe in them, what risk is my child to your students? And they never had an answer for that. This whole herd immunity thing is really new. I've watched it really just started appearing and being used, I would say about 5 years ago. I guess they started about 10 years ago, but it really started becoming this mantra that, well, and they worked at it. Think about it. I'm 48 years old. So it took them, 38, 40 years. And I'm sure people before us were using that same argument to figure out a way around it. They've been like, how do we get around this argument that our product, only, that it works, but we need you to use it. We need to force you to use it. And then they came up with the immunosuppressed child. Well, it's the immunosuppressed child that can't be vaccinated. That's why you have to be vaccinated. And I've been watching, I don't know if you've been watching this case of this medical kidnapping story up in New York, where they're forcing this teenager to have chemo, even though he'd already had his first round, there's no cancer in his body. And now they're forcing chemo upon him. They extricated him, I think, out of Florida, brought him back beyond his will, beyond his, outside of his parents' will, to put him back into chemo. And what's fascinating is they brought the argument that now the oncologist wants to give the kid a flu shot. The argument that was made recently in court against that and is currently, now it's on hold and they're going to do some depositions and stuff. But the argument was, wait a second, if this child who's already been through chemo, who has absolutely no his immune system is absolutely destroyed at the moment, if the entire purpose of vaccines is this herd immunity idea, isn't this the immune suppressed child that's not supposed to be having to get it and everybody else is? And the judge was like, whoa, it's a good point. But the truth, you and I both know, Jack, they actually are vaccinating everybody. They don't think there's a danger. And in fact, before a kidney surgery or before going into chemo, they want to vaccinate everybody. Before you go into a heart surgery now, they want to give you flu shots and vaccinations. So to me, then, what would be an immunosuppressed child? If it's not the cancer patient, who is it? So I think, if and you're not going to stop them. The insanity of hyper stimulating an immune system that's not there, throwing a potentially live virus or, killed virus into a body that has no current immune system that you've already wiped out through chemotherapy. To me, then, what they're showing you is they actually don't believe that there is such a child that can't be vaccinated. And if we can hold them at that, then you've lost your argument of why I have to be vaccinated again, because you're vaccinating everybody. There is no immunosuppressed child. Therefore, I'm back to the original argument which is, if your vaccine works there and you are vaccinating your infants and you're vaccinating your immunosuppressed cancer patients, then you're protected, supposedly, if your product works. And I shouldn't be forced to use a product that I don't believe in, especially if you're protected from me. So we may be coming full circle, I think, back to the original argument, and they are proving that they don't actually believe in herd immunity.
What now? You touched on the medical kidnapping. I mean, how often do you think this is going on? Do you think it's going to get worse? Is it a matter of they're going to kidnap about vaccines? They're going to kidnap about chemotherapy. They'll kidnap maybe about diabetes drugs. They can
Ritalin. I mean, where does it stop? If a teacher is saying, I cannot teach my class, your child is disrupting the class, or the only way I can teach my class is if they're on the drugs that our school nurse said they need to be on, or our school therapist said they need to be on, I say this is the slippery slope that people that even think they believe in vaccines here in California that are watching this go by, you just let pharma force a product upon your kids or they can't get an education. So you've already opened the door. Do you think it stops at vaccines? Why can't they make the same argument that for the good of the whole, your child has to be on a psychotropic drug? We need to give your child Ritalin, or we need to calm your child down, or your daughter is really emotional right now and is going through an emotional period. She needs to have Prozac. Once we've opened that door here in California. We've opened a door where what the parent thinks and what the parent cares about, how the parent is raising their child, has no effect on the laws here. The law supersedes the parent. And that's the danger. That's why I think Senator Richard Pan in California is one of the most dangerous politicians we've ever seen in America. It goes back to errors that have happened throughout history when you let the government believe it supersedes the human being or supersedes the family or supersedes the parent. We've already done that. And so, yeah, I think we call it medical kidnapping. For some bozo, they're like, well, good, I think the kid needs chemo. That's great. Even though you look at the stats and the chances of this kid, surviving the chemo is like 50%. And then the chance of living, beyond 2 years after it is only like 10% or some ridiculous amount. Like they're only going to extend the life of this child a couple of years. And this kid's saying, I feel good now. I don't want any more of this. I don't want to take the risk of dying going through this process. I want to work naturally and go to a natural practitioner. And the fact that kid his concerns aren't being met, his parents' concerns aren't being met, and the oncologist overrides that, the doctor has power over your child, that means to me, I think we're entering an era now where I'm starting to look at hospitals, unfortunately, like prisons or like concentration camps. If my child, breaks a leg or has an injury and I simply want the bone fixed, there are things that I believe medicine is great at. If you're in a car accident, all of those ER doctors, some great surgeons that put you back together. I love science. I love that. I don't believe in the preventative approach that Western medicine has towards health. I don't believe in it. Many of the reasons you pointed out, I think we're supposed to have these diseases to begin with. But if I can't take my kid and get that bone set that's broken or just from some natural accident without now having child protective services being brought in because they're challenging my lifestyle and my choices, we're in real trouble. We're really in trouble. That it's starting to take on this feeling that it's illegal to raise your child with organic food, clean, crystal clear water, either filtered or spring water, and avoid all toxins. Not only do I not vaccinate my kid, I don't feed my kid Doritos. I don't feed, I don't give them junk food. There's a lot of chemicals. I'm avoiding the hormone. I was on a radio show and the guy challenged me. He's like, how do you know that the autoimmune diseases that you're talking about, you're blaming on vaccines, aren't from, for instance, the hormones we're putting in cows to make them grow faster, or the chickens, or the herbicides and pesticides we're spraying on our food, or the fertilizers that are going in the ground? How do you know that that's not causing the autoimmune disease? And I said to him, he was pro-vaccine. He was out of New Jersey. He was up there arguing this measles outbreak and very pro-vaccine. And I said, I agree with you completely. I think we should be spending millions and millions of dollars investigating the hormones going into food, investigating the pesticides and the herbicides. Absolutely. I agree with you completely. But here's the problem. The FDA and the CDC that you're telling me I'm supposed to turn my life over to and believe them that they say that vaccines are safe, you just named 6 or 7 products they approved and told us are safe. They approved the same hormone, the same issues you're bringing up. The FDA and the CDC are corrupted by those very industries. They have Monsanto working at the FDA. They have Merck inside of the CDC. And because of that, I don't trust the science. And the guy literally said, well, I'm not saying I trust government agencies. I don't think they really are looking out for us. Then I said, then we are on the same page. We are not against each other. We need to join forces. For some reason, you want to believe the science coming out of the CDC on vaccines, but you don't believe it when it comes to all the food substances and the pesticides and the herbicides and the, Oxycontin or whatever. So I don't know why there's a faith in vaccines that goes beyond the reality we have when we look at pharma in any other category. Most people don't trust pharma. Why is it they trust vaccines? So, in the end, it's all coming around to, I think we're getting there, I guess is my point. And I think we need you, Jack. I need you out there speaking the hard line truth. It's true. I'm raising my kids the way you are and the way you talk about it. I just politically and where I'm working, I'm trying to get to a different population. I'm trying to get into the rooms of politicians that are clinging to a religion and they think it's science. If I can just unearth that a little bit, this whole thing is going to start flowing your direction. So I always think I'm an entry point, you're an end point, all of us are needed.
I just, and once again, everybody, you're listening to the Healthy Heart Show. I'm Dr. Jack Wolfson, cardiologist, and I've got the amazing Bigtree on, just a total freedom fighter, health fighter, and the stuff he's doing behind the scenes and in front of the scenes and on camera and going into Congress and really just making a big impact. Del, I mean, let me just say thank you so much, for all that information. My concern with the message of freedom of choice is that freedom of choice was tried in California, and that was the argument, and there it lost. Now, maybe next time around, freedom of choice will win, but I think, once again, and I know you and I we're kind of saying the same thing, and I know you believe it as well, we have to talk strictly about not freedom of choice, but that vaccines are dangerous. Vaccines can always cause some form of injury, whether it's short-term, long-term. We just have to identify what the injury is, and then we need to talk about all the benefits of these bacteria and viruses. I don't call them diseases. I call them, it's all just our body's response, right, to the virus, the bacteria. This is what we would classify as disease, and we have to highlight just natural immunity is the way I would roll with it. And I think, if you're, there's examples like, Physicians for Informed Consent. I mean, I was one of the founding people in that group, and then I dropped out of the group because the group was all about, making sure that people get the information, and it just wasn't strict enough, really. And it wasn't about clean your vaccines. It was about, hey, the Wolfsons are anti-vaccine. But there is a certain woman who ran for president, and she lost in 2016, Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And Hillary Clinton, right, she's famous for stating that your children are property. They're property of the state, right?
Yeah, I mean, so through all of that, number one, I completely agree with you that an argument, and look, we're facing this in every state that's still got its exemptions. It's under siege by the pharmaceutical industry. There is clearly a push for the pharmaceutical industry to own our bodies through their power being the number one lobby now in Washington, outspending oil and gas 2-1. There is a real danger to arguing a strictly choice. My child, my choice. I have a right to choice. And you're right, it did fail in California, and it's something I've warned, people I talk to in Texas. I travel around, I talk to politicians, I meet with groups, I meet at state capitals all over the country. I always say, do not run on a straight choice platform. It does come down to choice. I do believe in choice. I am not an abolitionist when it comes to vaccines, because I feel like that would be me turning around and doing exactly what they're doing to me, which is mandating an ideal and upon somebody else. I'm not here to tell you to stop vaccinating. I won't tell anyone to stop vaccinating, except for maybe HPV vaccine and hepatitis B, I think, which are just insane. I personally am not going to use those things, but you have the right to choose. It's a free country. You can, it's your kids. You want to feed them Doritos, I can't stop you from doing that. If you want to give them orange drink instead of water or Diet Coke, there's nothing I can do about that. Personally, I think it's child abuse, but that's up to you. That's happening inside of your household, and that's what this country represents. And I find it, I think it's dangerous to just turn it over. I don't want a totalitarian state run by clean living people. I don't want a totalitarian state at all, okay? I don't want the government to ever have that much power. So that's where I bowl the line.
How do we define child abuse, and how do we say, because I know you as a father, and I know the most important thing in the entire world to you are your children. How do we define child abuse? And is there a cutoff when we say, okay, that is a situation where the child needs to be removed? Because we would agree that if a child is being physically abused, that child needs to be removed. That is not the we as a society have drawn a line to say a child cannot be physically abused, therefore the state needs to step in to be removed from custody. That the child, you can't just say, that's my child, I can do whatever I want. And I agree, I'm anti-legislation and anti-government, but for me, you're right, Jack Wolfson, I do want to make those laws. I do want to make the laws an ideal situation and say, that vaccines are wrong, you cannot vaccinate. You cannot feed your kid Doritos. You cannot. You cannot let your child watch TV for 12 hours a day. You're right. So Del, tell me, where do we draw the line?
It's, that is the question. First of all, I grapple with all the time. It's also why I've become so passionate about, reading about my founding fathers and thinking about what that moment was like. If you were going to try and create a perfect government or a perfect political system, it's virtually impossible. It's virtually impossible. And when you read what our founding fathers say, and when they were coming around trying to create a truly free country, freedom has rules. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Freedom has got to have rules because your freedom can't impinge on somebody else. And, so where you see our founding fathers talking about government, they essentially say, look, we've picked this democratic structure of capitalism. But what they tell us, they give us warning after warning saying this is a necessary evil. Government by nature is evil. This is a monster that will take over your lives. It will devour you. It has in almost every spectrum we've looked at communism, every attempt around the world. We don't see anyone has ever created a perfect society where the government just doesn't take control. So what they tried to tell us is don't, because of your personal value system or because of things you care about or the things that you fear, do not legislate somebody else's morality or legislate the things, to try and make people better people. Because if you do, I mean, as Ben Franklin puts it, if you try to protect yourself, you give away a little of liberty to gain a little of safety, you'll have neither liberty nor safety. And I think that that's the truth here. And look, we could have this discussion of where would the line be. But Jack, I grew up a progressive liberal in Boulder, Colorado. I'm still an environmentalist. I still think we're destroying our environment. I think that the argument of global warming is just a stupid argument. Whether or not the earth is warming, I think it's just not an approach that works. I don't think it sells because people only think about today. We are so immediate. We've been trained to be so immediate that to worry about, I was just ranting with a friend of mine the other day, to worry about the ocean's going to be a foot deeper because some ice is melting 50 years from now. I mean, who cares? I mean, I do, because I look in the future, but 99.9999% of our society is not going to care what's happening 50 years from now. Change the argument. The argument really is your kid has asthma right now because of the amount of fossil fuel they're breathing as right now. Your water sucks. You can't eat tuna fish because there's too much pollution going to the ocean. You can't live the life you could live if we simply cleaned up our act, if we used more solar panels, if we used more wind energy, if we got ourselves a place. That's all things that I care about. But as a progressive liberal, or what I used to be, I now live in California, which is the most progressive liberal space I think there is in this country. And as I was telling you at the beginning of this, I'm worried that I don't have rights anymore because in order for progressive liberalism to work, it's decided essentially, and I remember thinking like this. I remember, when I would talk with my family, we all kind of wanted a benevolent dictator. Like we just didn't want to have to deal with the system. We knew we had the better ideal, so we should just elect somebody and say, screw it, I'm just going to use executive action. I can't tell you how many people wanted Obama and I voted for him, wanted him to use executive actions to pass all the stuff that he was being filibustered on by Republicans. And now we have a Republican that's doing what? He's using executive actions because our government is no longer working. But Jack, it's a slippery slope any way you slice it, whether it's for our ideals or somebody else's, to use mandate and bring in, the idea that it's child abuse And believe me, I used to say that I thought when someone's coming out of a shopping center with colored orange drink and crappy food and Fruit Loops, and that they should just be stopped. They should be stopped. There should be like police that stand there and say, okay, you are immediately going to be enrolled into a class and we're going to teach you how to feed your children because they are going to die early. They're going to be sick. They're going to cost us all a fortune. And if you don't comply after having the knowledge, then it's child abuse. That was the thinking of a progressive liberal. Now I see the danger of that because it's the same type of thinking that has people thinking they can force vaccinate me and my kids. That's their belief system. They're allowed to have it. They're just not allowed to force it upon me. So I think it's dangerous for any side. What we need to do is start saying we got to get back to a place where, you know what? I will teach classes. I will sit on, I will do my show, The High Wire. You'll speak to people. I will try to change your mind. And by the way, we are changing more minds than we ever have. I will use, science and literature and speaking to raise the consciousness of society. But we can't use the government to do it because it only ends up eating us.
I get it. Phenomenal answer. Let me ask you, to me, obviously the whole 2015 mandatory vaccination policy was strictly class warfare, because I can only imagine, and you'll tell me because you're obviously a California insider, I can say, people would say, well, we're not forcing your child to get vaccinated. They could be homeschooled. But the poor Hispanic single woman, to stereotype here, she had no choice. She has to work. Her child has to be in school. She has to vaccinate. That's all there is to it. So those people all got vaccinated. They didn't get medical exemptions. What about all the rich hotshots in Malibu and Marin County? What'd they do? They didn't take their kids to the doctor to get loaded up and, with the jab. What happened to them?
Well, I think that, first of all, we see reported all over the country now that they used to try and say that it was uneducated people that were not vaccinating. It was just like the poor people in mobile home parks or somewhere. But they've gotten away from that because they know it's not true. The biggest hot spots usually are around Waldorf schools. And by the way, Waldorf isn't cheap. It's not cheap to go to a private school that has a good education system. And so those of us that are drawn to those types of private schooling systems tend to have a philosophy. And what we are reporting more and more is that in the highly intellectual areas around Silicon Valley, around areas where there's industry, where there's millionaires, that the rich, educated people are the ones that are not vaccinating their kids, which, they tried to fight that for a long time. Now they know that it's true. But you're right. This is it's really a socioeconomic enslavement. I mean, in a way, if you don't have the money to bring your child home, and school them at home, or to have a path to some doctor that's going to write a medical exemption or something like that, whether or not they're paying people up, I have no idea how people are doing that. And by the way, Jack, I haven't even attempted to get a medical exemption for my kids because I'm Del Bigtree. I'm so screwed if I go into any hospital. It doesn't matter who wrote off. All I'm going to do is get some doctor's license revoked. So I'm in a position that's different than most because I'm so outspoken. I can't even fall back on some of the sort of quiet things that people are doing. But you're right. It's been argued. It was argued when SB 277 happened that this puts unfair burden upon people that are in a weaker socioeconomic space, and that's not fair. Our Constitution really doesn't allow for that, and that argument has been attempted. I've seen some cases where people are going to try and fight SB 277, bringing that argument up again. That when you make a law, and we've looked into this. And I'm not a lawyer, by the way. I have a really great legal team, so I just try to, push things forward. But one of the things, when you take away a right, which is what SB 277 did, everyone recognized that you were going to you were going to inject into a person's body beyond their wishes, or into a child beyond their parents' wishes. We all know that goes against the Constitution of the United States, but there's some rules to it. If there's an outbreak, if there's a danger, and they keep referring back to a case around smallpox as though chickenpox is smallpox, right there is a joke. And we're going back so far in time to case that set precedent. But the law basically says if you're going to take the rights away from a citizen, you have to use the least damaging approach you can. It has to, you have to have all of the right reasoning. but it has to affect, everybody equally. It has to be the least aggressive approach you can take. And SB 277 fails in every single department because we already know that, for instance, Tdap vaccine. The tetanus is not a communicable disease, diphtheria, and then you have pertussis, and it doesn't even protect against transmission. So there's one vaccine that you're forcing upon people that doesn't even meet the criteria. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary if your argument is herd immunity. It's an unnecessary vaccine. You should be able to just opt out right there, but you can't. So that shows that the government has overstepped. It hasn't taken the least dramatic means. It's taken the most aggressive means, meaning we're making you get vaccines that don't even fit into our argument of herd immunity. So those are things that are taking place here. But there's a danger, Jack. We've had so many failed lawsuits in California. Believe me, my legal team has been the number one priority. Where can we fight SB 277? And frankly, there's been such bad missteps that have set precedent against us that now it's really, really dangerous. And we're still looking at a couple of options, but I don't want to be a part of one more lawsuit that just closes the door and then can be used on precedent. And if it gets up to the Supreme Court and becomes a national decision, then I screw Colorado and Arizona and everywhere else. So this is a really, really dangerous time. California is a dangerous place to be with our philosophy, and it's a dangerous place to now fight, because it's so far down the road. All I can say is warning to everyone out there, do not get yourself in the position we find ourselves here in California. You must get involved with your vaccine risk awareness movement. Sometimes it's called health freedom, vaccine freedom, whoever it is, whatever it is. That is the most important caucus you should be in. You should be going to every time they're at the state capitol and talking to politicians. You should be a part of this, because this is the end. I don't think there's any topic that represents the destruction of freedom and the dream of our founding fathers more than this vaccine issue. And I'm talking to people that believe in vaccines too. Once you let your body be injected by the government beyond your choice, you have just destroyed the Nuremberg Code, which is what we were supposed to have learned from Nazi Germany when we put 16 doctors on trial for experimenting and injecting and trying, medical procedures on innocent people outside of their wishes. We are supposed to have consent. This is America, and this vaccine issue is destroying consent. And once you accept the destruction of consent, then the door is wide open. Doctors and medicine can do anything they want to you. So,
let me say, I guess I'd have to say that I'm never someone to give up, but I agree that California is a lost state, and it's almost like, if we use the, analogy that this is a war, well, if that battleground is lost, it's time for a retreat, and let's get back over to our bunker over here and continue the fight from this, and then hopefully we'll be able to overtake that state in the future. Let me ask you this, though. Tell me about freedom of speech. What risk do you and I have right now of communicating, them shutting us down? What risk is the high wire under shutting it down? What risk is your Facebook page being shut down, your Pinterest page, your LinkedIn profile? We know that the poobahs, the Zuckerbergs, et cetera, of the world, Google, they, shutting down Mike Adams, other people. Yeah. Give me an update. What's going on with our freedom of speech like this?
I think we are hanging in the balance. I think we are, and that, again, this topic brings it up. What is the one, freedom of speech is everything. And it is dying breath. When I see our media, what it represents now as freedom of speech, when it attacks people for things they've said, or you hurt someone's feelings, or those were angry words, it's dangerous, dangerous talk. When you look at students at campuses now that say that you are not free to make statements that hurt my feelings. Actually, you are free. And if we lose that freedom, there's nothing left here. You don't have freedoms once that collapses. And we are in a very, very dangerous position because, the internet, though these are private corporations making these decisions, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, and all of them. They're private entities. They can do whatever they want, except that we've all made a social contract with each other that this is how we're going to communicate with each other. This is just a piece of paper now. And so it's like saying, if you write on paper, you must adhere to these rules. Well, then that's the death of freedom of speech. And clearly our government isn't going to step up and try and stop them from curbing free speech. In fact, they're behind trying to shut down free speech. And proof of that is Senator Richard Pan again, who passed SB 277 in California, managed to really get through Congress and Senate a law to censor the internet. It was some sort of Internet Freedom Act, or no, it was Internet Truth Fact Checker Act, whatever it was called. The idea was he believes that everyone online should have to have fact checkers that can check everything they're saying to make sure that it's true. Now, you could say to yourself again, well, that sounds like a good idea. Like, why have bad information out there? Except that one of the biggest liars I've ever seen is Senator Richard Pan himself. And so when I see a liar trying to pass a truth on internet law, I get nervous. And it went into looking at texts. It said it right in the body of the law, looking at your emails, looking at text, being able to fact check how people are communicating with each other. I mean, that's as Orwellian as it gets. You don't get closer to the science fiction movie than that. But here's what's terrifying. I didn't think I lived in a country that would accept someone taking freedom of speech that far. That's the same as burning books. That's saying the government has to approve your language, which is exactly what 1984, people just sit there and approve language. It goes down the chute that's acceptable or the one that's not. I mean, that was the whole idea, and we thought that was just science fiction. I couldn't believe that not only could a politician run a law like that and not get chased out of every free city in America with pitchforks and torches. It made it through both houses and only didn't pass because Jerry Brown said, this is a little over top and unnecessary. Like, we got saved by Jerry Brown, but that means there's more than one idiot in there. There's hundreds of people that have lost touch with freedom so completely that editing someone's texts and emails and Facebook pages just seems reasonable to them. So are we in danger? I don't know how I'm still broadcasting, to be honest with you. There are people that have been shut down who have lost their Facebook accounts for simply sharing one of my episodes. Like, that was it. That was the final straw, and they can't get their Facebook page back. We've had multiple reports like that. So how I'm even up on Facebook, I don't know. We are pretty sure that we are being censored in, almost like they're running a rake through the people that follow us, because when you watch our show, you watch so many people commenting, I can't share it, I can't share it, I can't share it, or it keeps crashing, it keeps crashing. And I didn't believe it till it happened when my own phone, I couldn't open up my show one time. And so I think they're just sort of sporadically taking out large parts of our audience, but because they're not doing it across the board, we think, well, maybe it's human error or something like that. But what happens, Jack? What happens if Facebook closes out completely, if Pinterest, if Twitter, then they become religions, don't they? I mean, in the end, then we're beyond anything. We don't fit. We're heretics to some religion that we didn't know we accepted. I was thinking about that a lot this morning, that I really think vaccines, it's a religion because it meets all of the same problems you have with a religion. The science is literally saying this, and they all admit it. I told you that guy I debated in New Jersey. I said, they have done no safety tests on a single childhood vaccine. I can prove it. He's like, you don't have to. I know they don't, because it's unethical. I was like, right, so you know the argument. It's unethical to test a vaccine for safety. But I said, do you see the problem there? You do see the problem that, so this is a product made by pharma that lies to us all the time, kills tons of people and loses lawsuits all the time. They have a product that isn't being tested for safety. Do you not see that that's a religion? That's like, don't test our God. And by the way, not only do they not test for safety, they have complete liability from being sued. And then you add to that any single doctor or scientist that decides to do a study to really say, well, let me look at safety. Let's take some of this aluminum from these vaccines and put it in some mice put it in some monkeys. As soon as you decide to do that as a scientist, you're a heretic. It's a witch trial. You are an anti-vaxxer forever even questioning this product that's never been through a safety study. So to live in that environment, we are no longer, politics is disappearing. Those are religious beliefs, because science stands up to scrutiny. Science invites scrutiny, except this science is not. Just like free speech invites scrutiny. You're allowed to challenge the things I'm saying. I've said over and over, I'll have Paul Offit right here at my desk. I'll talk to anybody. By the way, it'll be a completely curious conversation. I don't think you're an evil person. I think you're misguided, and I really have some questions on how you're coming to the conclusions that you are. But they want to shut me down. See, they don't want to invite me to their desk. They don't want anyone to see me talking to them, because they know they can't answer my questions. And we are shutting that down.
I was invited to a podcast several months ago, and it was going to be a debate between me and David Katz of Yale School of Public Health. And he's supposedly a natural MD, but when I guess nobody really told him the terms of how we were going to debate, and he's like, "Hey, there's no debate here. I'm not even going to talk to somebody who's got a different opinion because they're wrong. So case closed."
Right.
Del, tell me, let's close up. Tell me what's new with Del Bigtree. What's the future hold? What's going on with the high wire? Tell me a couple things going on.
Well, we had an amazing year. As you know, we won 2 lawsuits against the government. We won a lawsuit against Health and Human Services and against the National Institute of Health, both based on the 1986 Compensation Act that took liability away from industries. We demanded to see the minutes. The law actually mandated that Health and Human Services is supposed to be meeting with Congress every 2 years to explain how they're making vaccines safer. Since we took liability away because the vaccines were too dangerous and causing too many lawsuits, they never had a single meeting. That's what we ended up getting them to admit to through the court systems. And the same thing with the National Institute of Health. They were supposed to have formed a task force to make vaccines safer. That would have included the head of the NIH. He was supposed to be the head of the task force. That was Francis Collins currently, and the head of FDA and CDC, because they recognized when they took liability away, this is a product that needs some help. So let's get a task force on making it a better product. Not one meeting that a task force ever had since 1986, over 30 years ago. So both of those things happened. So that shows the types of things we're doing. Next year, we've got about 5 or 6 lawsuits we're lining up in the same direction. We're slowly chiseling away at this foundation that is supposed to be vaccine efficacy and safety that doesn't exist. But it's not easy. You have to be very precise. And our whole approach, once we started Informed Consent Action Network, was not to try and win some big case, because it's really not out there, but to play into fractures in the foundation that exists and slowly bring this house of cards down. So we got some very exciting lawsuits coming. We also had put out an HHS notice. We laid out a 27-page document to Health and Human Services, all the issues we think there are with vaccines and how it's being handled, the corruption inside of HHS, the lack of safety science. A lot of people, they responded to us earlier this year with about, I think it's 60,000 pages of reference documents, of studies to try and defend themselves. So we have spent the whole year working through one question, one answer at a time with all the documents they've shared. In the new year, I'm going to present our response to the HHS response. And Jack, I can tell you, they've got nothing. But we are about to present the most thorough beatdown of this vaccine lie the world has ever seen. So that's coming in the new year. People can get really excited about that. And I think in the new year, I'm going to start discussing and getting into the background behind the Plotkin deposition. If people aren't aware of that, that's online. It's out there. This is the living father of vaccines in the world. He was supposed to be testifying in a court case where they're trying to force vaccinate a woman's child there. He ended up being cross-examined, or had a deposition that really sheds light on what the number one vaccine guy, the guy that wrote most of the languaging, probably was involved in coming up with the term herd immunity, Wait till you see how he gets back in the corner. We're going to discuss what the implications of that are. So those are some of the stories we're following, legal issues we've got going on. I'm not stopping, and we're growing, Jack. I've already been talking to donors. We're looking to get more funding in because we've got to expand. More media, more legal battles, and then science. We're funding science. I think that, a large-scale vax versus unvax study needs to be done. We're looking at the scientists who could do it. Of course, Dr. Mawson did a small study like that last year that showed us many of the things we thought would be there, but the argument is it's only 650 kids. We want 1 million kids. So we're looking into ways of doing that. So it's not going to stop. I'm going to keep working with guys like you. And, of course, we'll be here every single week on the High Wire every Thursday, bringing the truth as we find it.
You are absolutely amazing. Total freedom fighter, health fighter. We love you, Del. So happy to know you and to call you my friend. And you're going to be on stage at California Jam the weekend into the 24th. And I looked at the speaker schedule, and Saturday afternoon, it ends up with my wife, Dr. Heather, then Del Bigtree, and then Billy DeMoss. It is going to be absolute fireworks up on that stage. For anybody who's interested, californiajam.org. Go sign up. You could be a chiropractor, you could be in the public, whatever. It's going to just totally recharge your battery, just being around friends, and you get to see Del Bigtree on the stage, which is always just an amazing experience. Love seeing you talk. Appreciate everything you do, brother, and thanks for being on the Healthy Heart Show.
I appreciate what you do, Jack. Keep up the great work, and I suppose Cal Jam's probably the next place I'll see you, so take care.
Look forward to it, brother. Say hello to everybody. Say hello to Kat and Pat and the whole team over there.
I will.